because we have girls' belligerency in too to deal with.
Thank you,
And
Judge.
problems.
Thank you
And
very
I
much.
will reserve the right to submit additional written statements
course.
in response to what I hear today.
Excellent. That would be useful. Appreciate it. Mr. Cadenas.
Good afternoon, Chairman Carasso and members of the Committee on Education. My name is Carlos Cardenas. I am founder of College Factor, a nonprofit organization committed to ensuring low-income students attain a college degree. I'm also a former DC public school math teacher and wrote an opinion piece in 2015 addressing the topic before this committee. In this piece, I attempted to shed light on how schools all too often criminalize student misbehavior at the expense of providing them with the best education. The Office of the State Superintendent of Education recently released a report on the state of school discipline in the District of Columbia. The findings of this report show that minority students, particularly blacks, are subjected to disproportionate rates of discipline in their schools. As this report notes, although black students made up less than 70% of the students enrolled in the 2015-2016 school year, they accounted for 97% of the students expelled. OSSE's report on school discipline leads us to suspect that there is an underlying bias in our schools against minority students, particularly blacks. I taught for nearly 7 years in DC public and charter schools and noticed that, in fact, minority students are all too often misperceived by educators. I recall once a school principal referring to students attending our school as a bunch of thugs. The school served at-risk youth. They were all low-income minorities. But these students were committed to learning, just like any of us in this room. These same students, seen as thugs, once wrote a petition asking their school to offer them more math classes. And they gathered over 50 student signatures in support of their cause. I was once in the school cafeteria with other teachers, greeting students on the first day of school. A new student walked by. This student wore dreadlocks and had tattoos around their neck and arms. After noticing this student, a teacher turns to say, that was a student who would give us trouble in class. But this student was far from the trouble kid that teachers supposedly needed to watch out from. This student turned out to be one of the most respectful students in the school, who teachers often spoke highly about. This student often checked in with me about their performance in math and regularly shared that he was striving to get into the higher level math classes that I was teaching in the other periods. A third story that I would like to share with the committee involves the arrest of a young student at a different school I worked at. In the school hallway, this student was interrogated and handcuffed by police officers, then escorted outside of the school into a patrol car and taken to a juvenile delinquent center. Teachers later learned that this young student had taken a few bucks from a teacher's desk. And although the student had returned the money, the school still called the police to have the student arrested. Hastily treating students as criminal justice problems, like in this story, alienates our most vulnerable students who have the most to gain from excelling in school and helps perpetuate the school-to-prison pipeline. I understand working with teenagers can be difficult, but seeing them as minds to be guided is a powerful way to counter the flaws of typical teenage misbehavior. My first two stories show that students will show us a commitment to learning regardless of their race, economic background, or characteristics that us adults at times frown upon. That same young student who was arrested for stealing money would at times quietly ask me during class, Mr. Cardenas, am I doing a good job today? Prioritizing education over discipline, shedding our preconceived notions of teenagers, and focusing on those subtle messages students relate to us about their desire to learn can go a long way to reduce the instances and disparities concerning school discipline in the District of Columbia. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Camarada.
Thank you, Chairman Grasso and members of the committee, for allowing me the opportunity to share my thoughts about the discipline challenge vis-a-vis students with disabilities. My name is Julie Camerata, and I'm the Executive Director of the DC Special Education Cooperative, or the Co-op. Our vision is that all students with disabilities in the District of Columbia receive a rigorous, individualized, and inclusive education, preparing them for post-graduation success. According to PCSB's equity reports from the 15-16 school year, the charter sector has, for the first time, surpassed the city average for enrollment of students with disabilities. Last year, 15.4% of enrolled students were students with disabilities, compared to 15.2% at the citywide level. It's also worth noting that 18 of the 61 LEAs exceeded that average, serving between 22% and 100% students with disabilities. We're also happy to see that the discipline data for the sector is heading in the right direction. The percentage of students with 1 or more days of suspension has decreased, and the special education subgroup data has trended down year over year for the past 3 years, dropping 4 percentage points from school year 14-15 to 15-16, and that drop was more than twice the decrease for all students. That being said, there's still a lot of work to do. Students with disabilities continue to be disproportionately suspended. In 15-16, the citywide percentage of students receiving 1 or more days suspension was 9.1%, while for students with disabilities, it was 16.7%. We as a sector should not accept this gap. It's clear to me that many charters are working towards this goal. At the high school level, there are 4 LEAs that had no discipline gap for students with disabilities. They are finding solutions. In our view, solutions will be clear once we connect the practice of behavior intervention to disciplinary outcomes. This past year, I've been thinking a lot about the work of Dr. Ross Greene, the author of The Explosive Child, Lost at School, and Lost and Found. To paraphrase one of his key points, kids will behave if they can. He explains that students with challenging behaviors are not willfully misbehaving. Instead, they lack certain essential or lagging skills that most of us have acquired. I'm happy to apply I'd like to apply Dr. Greene's theory about kids to schools. I strongly believe that the majority of charter schools would if they knew how. Next month, the co-op will bring Dr. Greene to share his collaborative problem-solving model with practitioners. We had envisioned this as a citywide event, but within 2 days of opening the priority registration for our members, we'd received over 200 RSVPs. We're heartened by this response and are working to create more seats, which will be announced via our social media. It reinforces our belief that the willingness to do things differently is there, but the know-how is not. It's going to take all of us working together if we're going to narrow this gap. If the sector is going to achieve substantive change in discipline data, the co-op believes we must activate these 3 levers for change. Lever 1 is data. We need to harness the data we have and make sure we're looking at it in the ways that track to appropriate interventions. Our students with ADHD, for example, demonstrating certain specific behaviors that are resulting in suspension. What interventions at the individual classroom and school levels need to be in place to shift these behaviors? Lever 2 is buy-in and accountability. Do we authentically include students and parents in the development of school-based interventions? How do we do that? How can we use data to bring along school staff who are not yet willing to try alternatives to suspension? And what roles can and should city agencies play in this work? The final lever 3, is knowledge. Once we're using data effectively and have buy-in, we need to activate external expertise. Models like collaborative problem solving and restorative justice. We also need resources to develop talent within schools to implement these models with fidelity. On March 23rd, the co-op will convene a session that we're calling Mind the Gap, Getting to Solutions for Students with Challenging Behavior. We've brought together a planning committee comprised of reps from the PCSB, Advocates for Justice in Education, the Office of the Chief Student Advocate, DC's Office of Human Rights, and School Talk. We have participants from charter LEAs, behavior experts, school advocates, university, and think tank partners. We intend to establish a measurable goal for reducing the number of students with disabilities experiencing suspension and generate concrete ideas for activating the co-op's identified levers for change. I look forward to sharing back these results, the results with this committee, because we need solutions-oriented. We need to be solutions-oriented, and charters need to harness our ability to innovate as we tackle this challenge. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you today.
Well, thank you. Appreciate four of you for coming in today and sharing your expertise on this issue. Just generally, for all four of you, I know that it seems like we're doing better from this report that was submitted by OSSE. But I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on your thoughts of how you maybe dig in a little bit deeper and what your thoughts are, just for a couple minutes. I just kind of off the top of your heads, as you guys went through this report, what was your gut reaction at first? Where are you now on this? And in ways, I mean, I know we have a lot to go, and I kind of want to just hear from your individual perspectives on what you think, just off the top of your head, what are the areas that we need to improve on the most still?
Well, Judge Burnett, I've already thought of the idea of meeting with the chancellor of the school system to talk about kids who get suspensions, perhaps being able to work with another organization, the National African American Drug Policy Coalition, to provide them with counselor mentors to deal with their behavioral issues and deal with the family. And I've already suggested the potential for family mentoring to Chairman Mendelson, that in addition to grants being given for kids where the families are dysfunctional, and I believe I recall 2 or 3 years ago, there was a RFA put out for family mentoring. I think that's gravely needed in this country, and if parents can't measure up within 6 months of being adequate parents, that we ought to have a temporary guardianship for 2 or 3 years. I've had kids in an elective abuse system who went to live with grandma, and we have straight-A students are now in college because of taking them out of a situation where domestic violence and crime and drug pushing and prostitution went on.
Thank you. Mr. Villafranca, do you want to add something?
Excuse me. I think we were happy with, like we said, the suspensions, overall suspensions and expulsions actually going down. But I mean, like I said before, there's a lot of data that's missing, that's not accurately reflecting. For, like I said, the involuntary undocumented suspensions that are
Do you think there's a loophole there? I mean, you talked about the one example where there was a student sent home every day at 12:30.
And that was a pre-K student. In our written testimony, we go more into detail in our recommendation, but it kind of goes with the need for legal definition. Right now, the only legal definition in the DC Code is the one that was provided by the pre-K bill for out-of-school suspension, and that is for an entire school day or more. So we're finding that preschools are sending students home halfway through the day, but they don't have to document it because it's not a full school day, and therefore the kids are still missing out on their education without.
Right. Right. It sounds like there's a loophole. Do you think that that's? I mean, there must be more than that. I mean, how do we gather that information? I mean, you guys have it, a few other groups have it, but I mean, for me, I'm happy to tighten up reporting requirements. And if that helps us, the previous panel said the same thing, but I'm just trying to figure out, not to be overburdensome on the reporting too, and get accurate data. It's really important that we balance that out.
I mean, we can provide, we can go into our own cases, but of course it's, it's very hard. It's one area that is very hard to actually get the data for because it's, since it is undocumented, but, we can provide our data. Other organizations like AJE could provide their data, but it's still not going to reflect accurately the amount.
Okay. Did you want to add something, Mr. Cardenas?
Sure. As a classroom teacher, I think the strongest tool that we have at our disposal is learning, is education. Tap into a student's curiosity. And a lot of times that worked for me to avoid a situation, to de-escalate some situation in the classroom. Learning is incredibly powerful for a human being, especially for a teenager who's absorbing so much information around them. So that's just what came to mind as I read the report and been listening to other people's testimony, where that's the strongest tool that we have at our disposal, which is education, learning, and that should certainly avoid a lot of these situations.
In fact, we were at an elementary school the other day touring, and we were told about their Saturday Academy. Mm-hmm. And the Saturday Academy was designed originally a number of years ago for students that needed extra help to get their scores up. And now it's become a treat. You know, like the kids are like begging, can I get into Saturday Academy?
Right.
You know, and so now most of the kids do the Saturday Academy.
Right.
From, you know, whatever time, 9 a.m. to noon on Saturdays. It's like you said, it's a thing that can be made out to be exciting and interesting.
Exactly.
And, you know, Ms. Camarada, did you have anything else you